and welcome to Community Spectrum. My name is Laura Royer. What happens when dieting goes too far? Why does someone stop eating, literally starve themselves nearly to the point of death? Or why does the college student throw up every bite that they eat? Spectrum's producer, Stephanie Krause, has compiled a video to provide us with a further insight.
American society places great importance on being thin. We seem to be so conscious of our bodies. Our environment constantly bombards us with physical attractiveness. What really influences us in our self-perception? Has it become so desirable to be thin that it has become more of an obsession than a healthy regimen?
Prepared to answer some very pressing questions on this issue, we are joined in our studio audience tonight by Dr. Mariette Brouwers from the Counseling Center, Karen Shake, a nutritionist with the Student Health Center, and Cindy Chambers from the Nutrisystem. Please join me in welcoming them. Cindy, you are joining us tonight from Nutrisystem as a manager. What is your response to the video we have just seen?
Well, I think America today especially places a great deal of emphasis on being thin and being a beautiful, thin woman. And I think that's really hard to deal with for a lot of people.
But we're here in Corvallis, Oregon. How are the ladies of Corvallis affected by what society thinks?
They feel they have to fit that image. They aren't as good as other people if they don't. And it can be real troubling to a lot of people.
At what stage in their dieting careers do most women come to see you at Nutrisystem?
They come to us as a last resort. They've tried every other diet that's out there. They've gone everywhere, and they feel that if they have to pay money for it, that's it. I've got to do this, and they're very desperate when they do come to us.
Karen, you're a nutritionist here at Oregon State, but I understand eating disorders are not just a food-related issue. What is your response to the video that you have just viewed?
I think as far as working here on the college campus, many of the girls are really aware of their body image and overly concerned with their body image. And I think some of the men are too. I don't think it's just a women-related issue. And I think the video itself does give us a good idea of what's going on. And like you mentioned, it's the nutrition end of it really is a problem after they have a poor image of themselves, and poor nutrition comes as a result of that.
Wow, so are the ladies of Corvallis, Oregon interested in nutrition?
I don't know that they're so much interested in nutrition as their first priority many times is interested in body image and looking good and feeling good. And then I think that many times they get to a point where they start to realize that looking good and feeling good isn't the main key.
So it doesn't start with nutrition. Nutrition is sort of an afterthought.
Right.
How exactly does nutrition relate to eating disorders then?
Well, from what I understand, many of the problems with eating disorders are based maybe on psychological problems or low self-esteem, and they try to control their lives a little bit, and from that follows certain eating patterns which are poor in nutrition.
I'm glad you've brought up psychological problems because this brings us to our next guest, Dr. Mariette Brouwers. As a counselor of many victims of eating disorders, how do you feel about the video that we just saw?
I think the video is very accurate. The young women I've seen with anorexia or bulimia have taken that message of being thin to a great extreme. Many of them will obsess about food, obsess about their bodies, weight, calories, all day, every day, until it almost consumes their lives.
Is this something that they start with before they're at college? I guess I'm curious as to when the problem actually starts.
That's kind of an individual thing. With many young women, it begins in the home at maybe in their teens. Sometimes it begins in college. There isn't really one typical pattern for that.
So how big of a role does society actually play? You said it was in the home, then what does society have to do with it?
Well, my personal bias is that society is part of it, but not the main issue. The main issue is other things such as how they deal with their feelings. For example, some people with eating disorders are almost incapable of not only expressing strong feelings such as anger or guilt or depression, but sometimes they feel very threatened even feeling those feelings.
So eating disorders is more a symptom, it's not the actual problem.
That's what I believe, that the food is merely a symptom of other things that are going on.
Cindy, how many of the ladies with whom you were in contact would you say have eating disorders?
A lot of them do to some extent. I believe that most overweight women and men have an eating disorder that got them where they are. They're eating for some reason. As far as clinically eating disorders, probably less than 10%.
So is this a disease?
I think it's a symptom of some psychological problems.
Wow, okay, so it isn't a disease at all. It's more of a symptom, something that we're seeing to get to a deeper problem. Why do you think that women develop eating disorders specifically?
I think it's more desperation. You want to be thin, and it's real hard to get there. You know, you're willing to try anything.
Yeah. Wow. Karen, who has more eating disorders, women or men?
The majority of the patients that I see are women, and as far as I know, some of the men that I've seen, none of them have eating disorders, and really only a few of the women. When I find that they do have an eating disorder, if they relate that to me, then I try to send them down to the counseling center, along with maybe providing some nutritional information.
Why do you think this is?
That women have it more than men? Maybe just because of the differences in metabolism between men and women. Women tend to fight more with losing weight than men do. Women tend to be maybe generally less active than men as far as participations in sports, and I think exercise plays a key role in losing weight. And I think many women tend to think that losing weight can be achieved by a diet alone, and men, and again, this is just my belief, men will not diet usually as strictly, have an easier time of losing weight, but they'll usually be involved in more activities.
At what age are most of these people with whom you deal? At what age do you come in contact with them?
I'm dealing with the college students here at Oregon State, so anywhere from 19 to 30.
Okay, so specifically college students. Do you have any community ladies that come to see you, or community people?
It's the OSU Health Center, so just people who are enrolled in OSU are able to come into the health center.
How concerned are these people that you see on a daily basis concerned with nutrition?
I think because I work at the nutrition center, the people that come to see me, by the time they get to see me, are interested in nutrition itself. And prior to that, though, I think they probably fight for several months, if not longer, several years, with trying to just work with the diet alone or diet and exercise, and they don't realize that there's some nutritional information out there that they need in order to achieve a weight loss or a weight gain or a weight maintenance, and to do it healthfully. So
you say information that they need. Why isn't this being presented in our grade schools then? I mean, if the people need access to this information, how come the classes that they get in first, second, and third grade aren't having any impact?
I specifically can't answer that question because I'm not too sure what they're teaching at that grade level at this point. I know that they, from what I understand is going on in high school and junior high, they don't maybe talk about nutrition as much as they possibly could or should.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking is that high school students are also prone. I remember when I went to high school that a lot of the high school girls that I went to school with did have problems with their weight. They were concerned about it. They were either not necessarily anorexic, but they were constantly worried about how they were going to look for a certain dance that was coming up, or how they were going to look about you know, whatever date that they were going to go out on. And I'm thinking that the information needs to be there in the high schools. And I'm wondering, how come the public doesn't see this as a need? And how come they wait till the college level, till, as Cindy has said, till it's a last possible resort? You see people when they're in the final stages. Why do they wait so long to present this information?
Maybe because it's not as prevalent or not as apparent at the younger ages. But I think they're finding now that there are some eating disorders in girls as young as 5 or 6.
5 or 6 years old?
Not very many, obviously,
Oh,
but by the time they reach 11 or 12, it becomes a much larger problem. I don't see why they couldn't incorporate some educational programs at a young age. I don't see why they shouldn't. However, again, it probably comes down to economics.
If they're 5 or 6, do you think it's in the family or society?
I would say family more at that age than society. Many of the parents nowadays are really involved in fitness and whatnot, and if they're both working parents, they may belong to a health club, and maybe the children come home from school and don't have as many activities to do, and because of that put on a little bit of weight, and they see their parents, or they maybe view their parents as putting pressure on them to not be pudgy or whatever. So that might be part of the problem. Again, maybe only a small part.
Yeah. Now, I want some statistics here. I mean, some actual numbers that we can deal with. I'd like to start with our studio audience. You guys are going to be a statistic tonight. How many of you in our studio audience has ever been on a diet? One diet? See some hands here. Just, okay. How many have been on 2 diets? 2 diets. How about 3 diets? Okay, we're counting here. 4 diets. There's only 1 person in our audience that has been on 4 diets.
How about more?
How about more than 4 diets?
How about constant?
We have a constant diet in our audience here. I need to know, does everyone in our audience have an eating disorder because they've been on so many diets?
I think part of the problem with the word diet is everybody's on a diet. Okay, and you need to realize that there's a difference between a healthful diet or a nutritious diet and a weight loss diet or a weight gain diet or a weight maintenance diet. And so we're all on diets constantly. Everybody's diet is probably a little bit different, though. And I think if people to realize that diet doesn't necessarily have to mean weight loss or drastic weight loss, that would be a start in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'd like to add something to that. There's some very specific diagnostic criteria used to define eating disorders. It's not merely dieting. Bulimia is defined by purging the food, the vomiting or taking laxatives. Anorexia is defined by 15% or weight loss 15% below normal weight. And then there's other characteristics also that go along with both disorders. So someone being on a diet really almost has nothing to do with an eating disorder.
Doctor, how many college students are you in contact with daily?
With eating disorders or?
With eating disorders.
At the current time, I probably have maybe 10 clients with eating disorders that I see at least once a week.
10, and this is at Oregon State University? Yes. How representative do you think this is of the campus?
I think it's the tip of the iceberg.
Serious? Wow. At what age do you think these people specifically with whom you are dealing, what age do you think they became aware that they had eating disorders?
Probably late adolescence, 18, 19.
When someone becomes aware that they have an eating disorder, how do they find you?
Well, when they become aware that they have an eating disorder, they don't usually run out and seek counseling immediately. They usually have to get to a pretty desperate state, similar to what you mentioned, when they realize they're trapped in the anorexic or bulimic cycle, that it's very bad for them. They feel they can't do anything on their own. Sometimes that's 5 years, 7 years, 1 year. I've seen people that have been binging and vomiting for 12 years before they ever come in for help.
Sometimes they just get caught.
Yeah,
that's what does it.
That's true.
And then their friends talk them into coming in?
Most people won't admit it themselves. You just get caught.
Wow. I think we should take a look at the other side of the coin here. What about overeating? All we've been talking about is compulsion to be thin. I mean, there's no doubt about it that thin is in. But what about the person who can't stop eating and needs a chocolate fix every day, or they can't live without a certain candy bar? I'd like to know what you think about overeating.
I think a lot of people do it. Most of our dieters overeat quite a bit. They have extreme binges. You know, they crave chocolate, different flavors. We have a special program at Nutrisystem to satisfy those cravings. We have our flavor sprays and enhancers.
I saw your flavor sprays when looking through the pamphlet. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about the flavor sprays, just since you brought it up?
The flavor sprays are sort of like a breath spray. You can carry them in your purse, and whenever you have a craving for cheesecake or chocolate, you spray it in your mouth, and it satisfies the craving.
Guys, pay attention to this here.
They've done studies at Duke University with the Dr. Susan Schiffman, and they found that especially overweight people crave different levels of flavor and texture and odor in food. So they developed this program to satisfy that flavor. It's not necessarily a candy bar someone wants, it's that flavor of chocolate. So we found a way to package it in a little container without calories, and you can carry it with you.
Does it work?
It does work. It satisfies the craving. Sometimes it takes 5 squirts, but it's a lot better than 5 Hershey bars.
Karen, I wanted to ask you, if someone is overeating, aren't the chances that they're going to be eating more nutritiously balanced foods, isn't that chance there? So the overeater is probably going to have a more nutritiously balanced diet than, say, someone who's not going to eat.
I would say, from my experience, no. I think people who overeat on a regular basis don't do so nutritiously. They either choose the wrong foods, or they tend to not eat breakfast and lunch, and they tend to eat all their foods late in the evening. And many times they stick to the same foods, so again, they're not receiving proper nutrition by doing that.
I think we should go back to our studio audience here. It's time for more questions here. How many of you have friends, acquaintances, or roommates who have eating disorders that you're aware of? Wow, look at all these hands. I mean, how many of those hands, how many of the people that you know are anorexic? Okay, and how many are bulimic? Okay, we have 2 people that know people who are bulimic, and then 4 who know people who are anorexic. How many of these people are compulsive overeaters? How many of you know compulsive overeaters? More hands. Are you ladies surprised? I mean, is this common, or?
Doesn't surprise me. I don't think it's that there are more anorexics necessarily. I think they're more easily recognized.
Yeah. How does someone recognize a bulimic, someone with bulimic? Doctor, I'd like to ask you.
Well, I don't think you can necessarily tell by looking at someone whether or not they have bulimia. There are certain physical things that do occur if the bulimia is at an advanced state. For example, sometimes there's a puffiness around the face because of the water retention that occurs. That isn't really noticeable to someone that doesn't know about it. There's occasionally scraped knuckles from putting the hand in the throat to force vomiting. The teeth will erode from stomach acids eroding the enamel.
How long will that take? Is this someone who's been vomiting for 2 years or 3 years? I don't know how long.
Yeah, I can't give you an exact time, but not that long, maybe a couple of years. Depends how frequent the vomiting occurs.
And what are signs that someone should watch for an anorexic?
Well, weight loss would be the primary sign.
I understand weight
Yeah,
loss.
other things, thinning hair. Sometimes a very fine, downy hair grows on parts of the body like the face or the arms.
What would cause hair growth? I'm not sure, Karen, if you would be more prepared to answer this, being a nutritionist.
No, I don't think I know the answer to that, other than probably hormonal problems. Would you know?
It's one of the features of malnutrition.
Since we've brought up hormones and chemicals and so forth, I'm curious, at any time, does a chemical imbalance cause eating disorders? Have you ever met anyone who has had a chemical imbalance and was thus had an eating disorder?
An eating disorder can cause a chemical imbalance, but I've never heard of it the other way around.
Yeah, I can see where it would work the other way. Well, I'm sure that our studio audience has many, many questions, and just as soon as we return from our station break here, we are going to go to our studio audience. We are talking about what happens when dieting goes too far. Good evening and welcome back to Community Spectrum. We are here in our studio audience right now and they have many questions. Sir, stand up please.
I have a question generally for the panel, and that is that the definition of people who have a lot of eating disorders, whether they overeat, whether they undereat, whether they're bulimic or anorexic and so forth, isn't that primarily because not too many people really in the society know anything about food and how it's carbohydrates, fats, proteins, etc.? Is that not the case?
Would someone like to address this question?
I would say, being a nutritionist, I would think that is the case. Almost everybody I see has very little idea of what proper nutrition is, how to achieve proper diet, what carbohydrates, proteins are, and what they do for the body, and fats. It's something that probably we could spend a lot more time on, like we talked about earlier, educating the public on nutrition itself.
We're going over here.
I know eating disorders are a concern. I'm just wondering if you have any actual statistics, either for Oregon or for the whole of the states, how many females and how many males actually have these disorders.
There's been several studies done along these lines, and figures range from, these are on college populations. Over 50% of college women binge, most of the studies say. 90% of college women don't like their bodies as they are. They want to be thinner. And anywhere from 3% to 20% of college women have an eating disorder, a full-blown eating disorder. So that's really kind of shocking, or it shocked me to realize the extent of it.
Now, where did you say you got these statistics from again?
These are various studies that have been done in the literature on eating disorders.
And they say 90% of college women are not happy with the way they look.
Right.
We have another question.
I have a question for the counselor. When an anorexic overeats, or to their mind is committing an overeating act, what is it that they actually fear in the act of eating?
What do they fear, doctor?
If you asked an anorexic that question, she would probably say she feared gaining weight. But the gaining weight is wrapped up with a lot of other psychological issues going on. There's a control thing. They want to be in control all the time. The feelings part that I mentioned, it's very difficult for them to feel. And there's a lot other aspects going on. Usually it has something to do with the family as well. But the direct answer to that question would be fear of gaining weight.
Another question.
Oh, I have a question as to whether you find a lot of drugs being used, perhaps maybe dieting pills or anything by anybody who comes in to see you. Do you see that as a prevalent issue at all?
You mean drugs related to dieting? Right. That happens occasionally. Here at OSU, I don't see too much of that. One thing that is sometimes used is Ipecac, which isn't a drug, but it's something to induce vomiting. In fact, that's what basically killed Karen Carpenter. It's a toxic drug, quite poisonous, and I've seen a couple of people using that.
Cindy, oh, excuse me.
I was going to say, sometimes there's diet pills involved, but that's not the norm.
Cindy, I wanted you to respond to that question as well, because you seem to be in contact with a lot of the ladies of the community through Nutrisystem. Do a lot of people that you meet with, have they been using diet pills?
A lot of them have. Most of the stronger drugs aren't being used by physicians any longer, but things on the market like Fiber Trim and Dexatrim and things like that, they are used. I know a number of anorexics that we've dealt with that do use Dexatrim to suppress their hunger on a lot of occasions, and it's a little scary. They use them not by the package directions. We're talking 5 or 6 at a time.
Is there any way they can get addicted to the Dexatrim because it has so much caffeine and other drugs in it? Have you ever seen that, anyone?
I believe that caffeine is addictive. We've found that in starting people on our program. If we take them off of caffeine and they have been drinking it, they will have a withdrawal. They will get shaky, they will have a headache, and we tell them to go back on the caffeine and gradually go off of it. I think it's probably...
When these people come into your Nutrisystem program, do you ask that they stop drinking coffee because there's a lot of caffeine in coffee?
We do. We do a profile on the people to see what their lifestyle is now. We have individual diets for everyone so that we can talk to that individual and see what their lifestyle is like. It's not just the diet. We have to do a lot of behavioral changes with any dieting.
We had a question here in the front row.
Yes, with Cindy, if a certain person loses quite a bit of weight and then comes to you, you know, or do you have something to offer them when they do that so that they learn to keep that weight down?
We have a maintenance program with Nutrisystem that follows people throughout the year after their weight loss so that they learn the proper eating behaviors. They learn what a starch, a fat, a carbohydrate is, and in what proportions to eat those. It's a real good program. I've shared it with some schools in the area. I was interested when you were talking about the schools. The middle schools seem to be getting more into nutrition. My daughter is in middle school now, and she's very aware of how she looks. There are a number of the girls that think she's fat. You know, she's within 10% of her ideal body weight, but it's a constant pressure that she deals with. And I come from a school of 200 people, and at one time there was a bulimic club on campus. We all went into the lunchroom, or into the bathroom after lunch, and got rid of everything we had eaten. It was the thing to do.
So at one point before you joined Nutrisystem, you had bulimic tendencies as well, or is this?
I did. This was at the school my daughter goes to, but I did, yes.
Wow. Doctor, I want to switch the channel a little bit here. What sort of a background do you have when you counsel these people?
You mean what approach I use, or?
Yeah. Or personally, what sort of a background do you have?
I've done some research in the areas of eating disorders, and I've had quite a bit of training in this area. I've done numerous groups throughout the years, and I see quite a few women individually.
Yeah. We had another question here.
I had a question for you, because you've been, what is your self-image like now, and if you can, in retrospect, take us back, what was it then?
I had a very low self-image. I was always overweight. I had an uncontrollable urge to binge. I would eat it. If a pound and a half of Oreos, I mean, I could suck them down quicker than anyone. And afterwards, I would be so mad at myself, and I had no control. How could I have done this? And that's when you figure, well, I can get rid of it right now and I'll be okay. It's a little scary. I never would have admitted that I had bulimia. There's no way. That's disgusting. That's awful. And yet I would follow up an evening of binging with taking 4 X-Lax pills, which do no good. I never lost any weight from those experiences.
We had another question.
Yes, with Karen, I was curious if it's women actually have more eating disorders than men, or is it that women are coming forward more so than men are?
I think there are more women with the problem than there are men, and then I also think that maybe within that the women are a little more ready to come in and willing to open up than maybe men might be.
We have another question.
Yes, we talked earlier about friends of ours that might have bulimia or anorexia. And I know I live in a sorority with 60 girls, and personally I come in contact with people that I know have that problem. And in the best interest of them, I would like to help them. What's the best way to do that?
I have a couple of suggestions, and one is to avoid what I call the puke patrol. I think sometimes in the sororities they start spying on each other, the women, and okay, oh, I know so-and-so has bulimia because all the Oreos are gone or there was vomit in the toilet. I really say to avoid that, because the woman with bulimia will catch on, and that will scare her quite a bit. When you're ready to confront her, it's a good idea to have maybe 1 or 2 people that are close to her approach her with an aura of concern. So approach her with something like, you know, Jane, I'm really worried about you because I think that you have bulimia. Here's why I think, because you're hiding things and I'm just worried. Okay, if she won't talk about it, or if she denies it, maybe drop it for then. If nothing changes, try it again in a couple weeks. So escalate to the point where eventually you're really encouraging her to go into counseling. Now, all that is a moot point if you think that she's in medical danger. Then it's time to do something more serious. Do not call the parents right away, though. Do not call the boyfriend. Try to approach her on a one-to-one type of basis at first.
I had a question for you. Being in the Greek system, do you think more girls are prone to bulimia or to anorexia?
I believe more are prone toward bulimia. I think one of the big factors is I know our sorority has a wonderful cook, and there's always stuff out. There's pie, there's cookies, there's candy, there's everything, and there's so many chances to overeat, and there's so many girls that go in and, you know, they may not even be hungry, but you walk in the kitchen and it's there. And so I think that there's a lot of girls that are prone to overeat in the sorority system.
We had another question.
Is there something that's available here or someone to contact here if we come across or we have a concern for somebody who may be either anorexic or bulimic but doesn't have the funds to go to a private facility?
There's counseling available for OSU students at both the counseling center where I work and the mental health clinic. And then nutritionists are available for free also
For
to students,
free,
right?
yes. Yeah.
Another question.
I think probably the psychologist is probably going to have to answer this. Of course, I'm in middle age, and as you can see, I don't really worry too much about whether I overeat. But I just wonder, it's in my dark past, but I don't remember too well, but I do remember that when I was younger and I wasn't married, that I concerned myself considerably about how I looked. And I wonder if this isn't really the root cause for a lot of this problem.
The root cause being people concerned about how they look when they're younger. Doctor?
Well, I think that that's a very big factor. And that video that we saw shows that the media is pushing that kind of thing even further. Sometimes especially with eating disorders, the person, let's say with bulimia's entire self-esteem is based on how they look. So they get up in the morning and they notice that their stomach's sticking out or something. That'll ruin their whole day. They'll feel like a worthless, rotten person. And yes, the emphasis on appearance is very strong.
We have another question here.
Yes. Do women who have these eating disorders ever regain or have a normal self-body image later on after they've, seek counseling and gone through all of that? Do they ever think of themselves in a normal way ever again?
Yes, there's hope. It usually takes a lot of work, though. It's not a phase. It's not something that will just go away on its own. It takes a lot of work, and usually they need counseling to help them through that.
For parents who are concerned about their children as far as providing proper nutrition, maybe Cindy, you can answer this for me. And for parents of overweight children who are coming home and upset and all of the above, what can be done to give them the proper guidance that they need?
I think, well, in our case, we cannot start a child on program that's parents want them to be on program. It would be like you treating an anorexic whose mother brought her in. The person, it's the same as alcoholism. The only difference is you can stop drinking forever and you have to eat. So but it has to be something you want to do. I don't think you can force someone to do it.
I agree.
Yes, can you tell me, if somebody comes into your program that you have, what do you do to assist them as far as learning to control or controlling what they're eating while they're trying to lose the weight?
We have a counseling session with them first to find out what their history was, what their health history is. They see a nurse on a weekly basis who helps them monitor what they're eating, helps them make their selections for the week while they're on the weight loss part of the program. And they see a counselor to change their eating behaviors. It isn't going to work just to go on a diet. The eating behaviors have to change or the weight's going to come right back on. So it's a multi-phase program.
They do this just once?
We pride ourselves on being people's last diets. They come in weekly while they're on the weight loss. Once they've gained their ideal weight, they have the year of maintenance to maintain their weight.
Do you have programs for children?
We do.
We're running a little bit short on time here, but save your questions because we'll be right back after our station break. What happens when dieting goes too far?
This little gopher knows something that could save you if you ever have a fire in your home. He knows 2 ways out. See, if you can't get out the usual way because fire is blocking your door, have another way out. Gophers have 2 ways out. You're late. And people should have 2 ways out, too. If your usual way out is blocked by fire, think, what would your second way out be?
Children believe what their parents tell them.
You're pathetic. You can't do anything right.
You disgust me. Just shut up.
You can't be my kid.
You're worthless.
Hey, stupid, don't you know how to listen?
You're never going to amount to anything.
Why don't you go find some other place to live?
Words hit as hard as a fist. Stop and listen to what you're saying. You might not believe your ears.
I wish you were never born.
Take time out. Don't take it out on your kid.
When you graduate from college, what will you be able to offer an employer?
I like working with people. I really like working with people. I really like people.
I'm a people person.
I'm eager. I'm eager.
Eager. I think I'm eager.
And I was president of 5...
Offer an employer something meaningful, practical work experience. A nationwide college program called Co-op Education can give you that competitive edge.
And I'd even relocate.
Right, Co-op Education. It's the experience you need for the job you want.
And welcome to our special guest, McGruff the Crime Dog.
Thanks, Dick.
Now, do I understand that neighborhood watch programs have reduced crime in some areas as much as 50%?
That's right, but there's more to be done. Start a volunteer escort service for older folks.
Aha, good news for the old folks at home, eh? What about the young folks?
Start McGruff houses.
Which are?
Houses kids can duck into in case of trouble.
For more information, write to this address and help
take a fight out of crime.
Good evening and welcome back to Community Spectrum. We're still here in our studio audience with more questions about eating disorders.
I have a question for the panel. I don't know which one would be best to answer this, but I've heard that anorexia, well, I know that it can result in fatalities. How much is bulimia involved in this? I mean, I've never heard of fatality as a result of bulimia, and also how often are suicides the result of fatalities in these eating disorders?
Would someone care to address this question?
Okay. Most people with bulimia don't die. There's rare cases where some have died from choking on their vomit or from this ipecac stuff that I mentioned. So it isn't nearly as lethal as anorexia. Would you repeat the second half of your question?
I was wondering if suicides are often the result. I know I have a friend who died, she had bulimia and she committed suicide, and I was wondering how frequent that was with both anorexia and bulimia.
I check for suicide with all my bulimic clients. And some women do get so depressed, so desperate that they consider that option. I don't know any statistics on how many have, what the lethality rate is, but it's certainly there.
Is it more common with bulimia than anorexia? Is there more depression involved in bulimia?
I would say yes, because the women with bulimia tend to know they have a problem. The ones with anorexia will deny much more strongly that there's a problem. If somebody's throwing up or taking laxatives, they know that that's abnormal.
Karen, I have a question for you. How does excessive exercise fit into eating disorders? I mean, some people, they'll eat all they want and then they'll just exercise to death. They'll just exercise constantly.
I think that's a major part of eating disorders, and I found that in some of the clients that I see. As far as over-exercising, obviously, it's an obsession. It becomes an obsession just like the food is, and it consumes, a major part of their day, and they don't get to finish certain responsibilities that they need to finish as far as school or work or whatever, home, family life. And so it tends to be a problem which just adds or complicates the whole process.
How common is your meeting students that do over-exercise as opposed to going on a diet?
Usually the women that are overweight have a lack of exercise, and the women that I've seen that are anorexic over-exercise, not only in intensity and duration, but also in frequency.
Is there a happy medium between nutrition and exercise and living a normal life? I mean, if there is such a thing.
Oh, definitely. I believe that proper nutrition is something that you need to do every day, just like brushing your teeth. And I also think that exercise is something that should be a major part of your weekly living if you were to follow American College of Sports Medicine guidelines, you know, 3 times a week for about 30 minutes or more. Should be incorporated into everybody's lifestyle from now till the time that they die.
We had another question back here. Would you please stand?
Yes. I had a question about female athletes and eating disorders. There's a connection there. And why are women who are already fit beginning eating disorders, such as anorexia, like women who are ballet dancers or long-distance runners? Why is there a connection between that?
I think there's a connection because there's a lot of pressure on them to fit an idealized body type. Coaches put a lot of pressure on them, peers put a lot of pressure on them. You look at the elite athletes in the world, and they are very, very thin in many respects. You know, the long-distance runners, the gymnasts, very petite, very small. And so in order to compete and do well, I think they tend to believe that you need to be very thin to do that, which is not necessarily so.
We have another question over here.
Yeah, I'll have to confess a couple of things. I manage a health and fitness facility. We have about 2,100 members. 72% of them are women. And a lot of times we get these women in that have been on the Weight Watchers, they've been to Nutrisystems, they've been doing a lot of things, and when they come to an exercise program, I ask them what they're eating, and they said it amounts to approximately anywhere from 500 to 1,000 calories. And in my opinion, I think that's ridiculous, because I don't think anybody's what they call basal metabolic rate is that low to begin with. For example, I weigh 270 pounds, and my basal metabolic rate is about 4,500 calories. I also work with competitive women bodybuilders, and they have any percentage of body fat anywhere from 5% to 8%, and these women eat on an average about 3,000 calories a day. And they do this, and so I'm wondering what I'm finding in the clubs versus what you were talking about here in terms of how all this fits together, because I'm finding myself having to undo a lot of the damage, in my opinion, that has been done with programs. I don't know necessarily as yours, but Weight Watchers and those kinds of programs.
I think part of the problem on that, if you let me answer this one, is many people don't know that much about nutrition, and they're underestimating the amount of food that they're getting in their diet. They think they're counting the calories correctly, and they're not. Very few people have a low basal metabolism, which would allow them to maintain their weight on anywhere from 500 to 1,000. Generally speaking, proper weight loss is achieved through no more than 1 to 2 pounds a week. And with women, and we're talking about a normal woman, maybe 125 to 130, no less than 1,100 calories a day would be expected. But what happens when you diet is, if you're normally taking so much food in, and then you go on a strict diet and you don't exercise, your body realizes what's happening. It realizes it's in a starvation state, and at that point it says, hey, I'm not getting enough food, so the food that I'm going to get, I'm going to hang on to it as best I can. And so this lowers basal metabolism, which lowers energy, which makes these people lethargic. So maybe they do get to a point where the calories that they're taking in are so low that they think, geez, I can't hardly eat anything. But what they need to do, instead of fasting or starving themselves, is maintain a nice baseline of anywhere from 1,100 to 1,300, 1,400, depending on age and weight and size, and then incorporate an exercise program to help increase basal metabolism.
So Karen, once a person has lowered their basic metabolism rate, how do they get it back up?
One of the best ways, I think, would be just to incorporate exercise into it.
And exercise will just bring the metabolism rate up?
Generally, yes.
Cindy, did you have a comment on this?
I don't think you can base any diet just on calories. We have specially designed food. You will eat anywhere from 1,200 to 1,800 calories a day, depending on your activity level, your medical conditions. But it's not just the calories we count. We have a balance of fats and carbohydrates and proteins, so that you're eating the number of proteins you need, and carbohydrates to feed the proteins, so that you're getting the nutrition as well. You could eat 1,200 calories of potato chips and you're probably not going to lose much fat.
Does Nutrisystem put its the people that visit Nutrisystem on any sort of an exercise plan?
We have an individualized exercise plan. It's not mandatory. Most overweight people hate the thought of exercise. They come in, they say, I'm not going to do it. If you've ever weighed 220 pounds and tried to exercise, you know it's not only painful, it's chafing, it's awful. You look terrible, you don't want to wear exercise clothes. So we help them with an individual program.
Okay, I've got someone who's been patiently waiting.
Yeah, I was wondering, you always hear about, okay, whether someone's, say, 10% under their body weight or whatever. How do people know what their ideal body weight is? Because there are so many tables and things, and a lot of them seem as though they quote incredible weights. How do you know what is your ideal body weight?
I think to answer that question, you don't necessarily, or you shouldn't look at height and weight charts. You need to look at the individual themselves, their age, their weight, their sex, their activity level, and medical complications. And the best and most accurate means of assessing body percent fat is to do an underwater weighing test or a skin caliper test, which correlates fairly well but is not quite as accurate as underwater weighing. And that will tell you how much of your total body weight is fat weight. And from there, you can make an estimation as to whether you should maintain, gain, or lose.
We have another question here.
Yes, doctor, I think you defined anorexia as under 15% of your body weight. What happens, though, if you're average body weight, but you're still obsessed with what you eat, as in you avoid all the fat foods, anything fried, you eat a lot of salads and bread, but you think about food the whole time? And maybe at the same time, you love something like chocolate and you have your chocolate every day, and you count calories all the time. Is that a food disorder? Is that a tendency towards anorexia? Or
I would think that's a tendency toward anorexia. How I view that is, if it bothers the person, if it's interfering with someone's life, then it becomes a problem. If it's not interfering with someone's life and they're healthy, I suppose it's okay. Probably not the most health-inducing thing, but okay. It's not necessarily an eating disorder.
It seems like to me a lot of what you've been talking about comes right down to education. As far as nutrition, I know they're starting about education with AIDS and other things, and I know when I was in grade school I got the basic food groups and everything else like that, and you really don't get nutrition unless you go into the more economics type classes if you're a nutritionist or whatever. When do you think it should really begin more looking like tabling calories, etc., to really fulfill your maximum body weight and everything? I don't know who on the panel could answer that. Should it start grade school or?
I should think it should start at grade school or start at the home if possible. Hopefully the parents have enough education to start it at the home at an early age and then continue on through the remainder of that person's education. Because there are so many misconceptions about calories. One of the things that you mentioned was 1,200 calories of potato chips. A calorie is a calorie. It doesn't matter what food you get it from. So if you have 1,200 calories of potato chip and 1,200 calories of meat, steak, you're going to either, if 1,200 is too much for you, then you're going to gain weight no matter what the food is. Okay. But obviously if you're going to be on a diet of 1,200 calories, what you need to keep in mind is if you do know how to maintain weight and you have an ideal calorie intake level, within those calories you should have proper nutrition as far as eating foods from all of the major food groups and maintaining that. But back to the education, it should start early and should continue on, and I think that's not happening at this point.
Another question.
It seemed like about 10 or 15 years ago, we really didn't talk about this too much. Bulimia and anorexia weren't really an issue. But now we're starting to recognize the problem, and it's in the media, and there's so much hype about it. And do you think that's causing the problem in a way, too? Maybe guys that had never even heard of sticking your hand down your throat and making yourself throw up, bulimia, are all of a sudden learning about it on TV and saying, hey, that's an idea. Do you think it's contributing to the problem as well as helping it?
Has media caused and hurt us, Doctor?
I think that may have happened, that some people get the idea from hearing about it in the press. However, I think that what has really happened is that the media has brought it out of the closet, so to speak. It's been around. 10 to 15 years ago, Cindy mentioned in the high school, I remember living in the dorms and there were people with anorexia and people with bulimia, but nobody ever mentioned it. Now it's more recognized as a problem. So I don't think that there's necessarily more today because of the press, you know, maybe one or two people, but in general I think it's just more recognized.
Doctor, do you think because it is more recognized that it is more acceptable then?
Oh, no, not at all. It's not more acceptable.
We have another question.
I was wondering if you've seen any decrease in the number of cases you see in the last, year or so, because I think it has. The media has focused on it and encourages people to get help, and people can recognize it. Have you seen any decrease?
No, I haven't really seen a decrease. I have seen, in fact, an increase in the past year. I think that the media has made it okay for people to come in and get help.
Did we have another question down here?
Yes, I was wondering if you could tell me if there's a difference between, like Wayne said, that he was a constant dieter, you know, and someone who is just plain aware of their diet all the time. You know, I don't know.
Okay, I think it gets down to this thing again. If it interferes with your life, it's a problem. If the person is constantly obsessing about food, how they look, their appearance, if their self-esteem, who they are, is based on their appearance of, oh my God, I gained 1 pound, I must really look ugly, everyone's going to notice me. If that kind of thought process is occurring, there's a problem. So it's not, there's no real fine line there. That's kind of a vague answer.
One more question here.
Well, I was just real curious. What is the criteria when someone comes to you for deciding what kind of diet you're going to put them on, or how many calories you're going to put them on, Cindy?
We talk to them to find out their lifestyle. Their ideal weight is put out by the computer. What their weight is now, their age, their height, their bone structure, what activity level they have now determines what their ideal weight should be. The nurse will also test for a skin caliper. We will not take anybody below 10% of their body fat.
Another question.
Well, when you were talking about a calorie is a calorie and the balance of nutrition, for somebody who doesn't have a great deal of knowledge about that, are you saying that that all needs to work together in order to achieve either weight loss or weight maintenance? I've been on diets before where all I've eaten is salad, and I don't know why I can't lose weight. Can you answer that?
Okay, I'm not really sure what the question is. Are you asking why can't you lose weight because you're eating just salads, which is vegetables, or go ahead and maybe
yeah, why do some
rephrase that.
people not lose weight on diets where other people might lose 10 pounds?
Okay. For me to answer you specifically, I'd have to know what you're eating, and I'd watch that for more than just one day.
Okay, we'll save this for after the show here. As we're closing up here, I want to encourage people who do have friends or roommates or associates who have eating disorders to go and get help. Where exactly can they go to get help? Cindy, where do they contact you at Nutrisystem?
At Nutrisystem here in Corvallis, we're at 758-7150.
Okay. Are those numbers being flashed on our screen right now? Okay. And Karen, how does someone get a hold of?
OSU Student Health Center, 754-0271.
Okay. And Doctor?
OSU Counseling Center, 754-2131.
Okay, so if you know anyone who you want to get help, direct them to these numbers. We can get you the numbers right after the show. You can come, you can contact any one of our panelists here. And I want to encourage you, this is a problem, that it isn't a new problem. It's just coming more to the light right now. And if you do know people, strongly encourage them. The help is out there. The trained professionals are out there. Okay, we have a few more questions here as we're closing.
I had one other question in regard to, can't you really get fat basically two ways? One is that you eat too much food, and the other is that you slow your metabolism down by eating too little food. Is that not the case?
Yes.
Because when you stop and you slow it down, as soon as you even walk by a donut, you gain 5 pounds.
Or 10.
Or 10 or 15. Isn't that basically how it goes, pretty much?
Yeah, if you decrease your calorie intake and you don't change any of your activity level, your body senses that as a starvation state, and it tends to slow your metabolism to conserve the energy that you are getting, even though it's not enough. And when that happens, then you tend to be more lethargic and do less activity. Just compounds the problem.
Okay, our show for tonight is over. We thank our studio audience for being here tonight. You're welcome to stay after and ask all the questions you want to, and we'll run around and talk to you. And we would like to thank our home viewers. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Good night.